Hi everybody, here we are on Think Differently Thursday again, and I'm proper excited today because I'm talking to somebody that I absolutely love chatting to. Hiya Sarah.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well. Very well, very relaxed.
Oh good, I'm glad about that. Tell people just briefly, for anybody who doesn't know, who are you?
I'm Sarah Fenning. I'm married to Steve Fenning, which always helps identify me. I am 48. I'm originally from Essex and I have all my own teeth.
I love it that you gave your age. I've noticed on quiz shows this is a real thing, and I'm always thinking, why do people have to say their age? On The Chase, they literally say their name, where they're from, and their age. And
Do they?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought I might get compliments. You know, I thought I might get people saying, "Oh, I didn't know."
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed it. I missed it there.
Never mind.
Sarah, I can't believe.
Never mind.
No way.
I tried.
Okay, and you've said there that you are originally from Essex, and I realise there's no Suffolk accent, even though you're a Fenning, there is no Suffolk accent there. So
well, I could do a passable one now.
Go for it.
You have to go down the road and you have to talk like this, and all your things go like a bit like that.
I think you have to go Darwin. I think there has to be two syllables. Darwin.
Yeah. But I've heard a lot of people, it kind of is a bit abrupt and it kind of, you talk like that.
So Essex was home originally.
I know.
Me too. When did you?
That's why we like each other. We recognise something. It's in the eyes, isn't it?
We're foreigners. So when did you come to Suffolk?
I think it was 97 or 98, because I moved up here for a teaching job.
Right, okay. So presumably you came and didn't know people, or did you have people that you did know here in Suffolk?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't know anybody. I moved up, I found a flat in a village in Ockhold. Right. And we moved up, Mum and Dad moved me up with them. We had 2 carloads of stuff. We moved up in the rain. It was a first floor flat, and I realised when I got there, the landlady was out and I hadn't got the key. And we'd driven up from Essex with this 2 carloads of stuff in the rain. And fortunately, the bathroom window was open. And it was a really low window, like on the ground. It's kind of in the eaves, but it was on the first floor. So we whipped next door to the neighbours, borrowed a ladder, and we moved. It's amazing what you can move in through the bathroom window. Mum went in first. I was on my knees on the bathroom floor, and Dad was going up and down the ladder, and in the rain, poor thing. And I remember saying to him as he went, I said, "Dad, you'll laugh about this one day." And he said something I couldn't repeat. And then a bit later, when we moved in whatever we could, and it was all that kind, I found the key in my pocket.
Oh no.
And I didn't tell them for about 3 weeks, I think.
I thought maybe you were going to say the landlady came back and you'd moved into the wrong flat.
No. Other things happened in that flat, but that was how I moved in.
Wow. So you moved to Suffolk and you didn't know anybody, and was this your first teaching post?
Yeah, it was my first first proper job.
Right.
And I met that one of my colleagues at school came to the Forge. It was MCF then.
Yeah.
But because I was looking for a church, and so she said, "Oh, I'll try MCF." And like the first Sunday I walked in, I kind of thought, "Oh, yeah, this is me. This will do."
Right.
And so that was, so we worked together. Joy Trithall it was, and we worked together, and we were, good friends, and it was lovely.
Nice. And so had that been like a childhood dream? Was that what you'd been working towards for a long time?
Well, I first fancied teaching when I was about 7, I remember, because I remember thinking, this is easy. They just have to mark books and tell people off.
Yeah. I was the same. I played it with my brother, and I was the teacher and marked some sums. I thought I could do that for a job.
And that is what you do, yeah. And then I spent the rest of my growing up years thinking about everything else. Okay. And my mum mistakenly gave me an A to Z of careers, and you could tell roughly where I was in the book by what I wanted to be. So I did want to be everything. I wanted to be a deep sea diver and a florist and a funeral director, and eventually as a zoologist.
Right.
And I did keep coming back to teaching, but I was never sure. And I kind of kept with the teaching in the absence of anything else. Okay. So I liked lots of things, but teaching was safe and it kept your options open.
Yeah.
So I kept, even when I wasn't sure, even at A levels, it was like, well, I'll take these A levels because I'll go towards teaching because it keeps my options open. Yeah. And I went through the whole of my teaching degree saying, well, I don't think I'm going to teach. Mm. And then when I finished my degree, I took a year out. I think I took one before and after. And I worked in the NHS. My mother was an occupational therapist, so I worked with her for 18 months. And I loved it. I loved it. And I nearly retrained. But that seemed a bit kind of wasteful. So I got a teaching job, and I thought, I'll do this for 2 years. And then that will give me, a gateway into the things I do want to do, like work in museum service or something like that.
Yeah.
And however many hundreds of years later, here I still am. And actually, I love what I do now. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about this last year or so? I mean, it's got to be the most odd year that we've ever had in teaching. This last year.
Do you know what? I would say it is not my oddest experience.
That means you've had a stranger time in teaching. Tell us about it.
I think because I'm not a real teacher. I am what Alice used to call a fake teacher. So for quite a lot of years after I left kind of proper teaching, I've been doing supply ever since. But I've been doing it's not just turn up on the day and do a day and go home. It's kind of be in this school for a term, or do this
cover maternity and that sort of thing,
something like that, or come in and cover PPA every Thursday afternoon, sort of thing. So and because of that, I've taught in various schools around Suffolk, and it's been interesting. And my most interesting was when I worked in Stoke Ash School, just as they made the decision to close it. And so I came in as it was, it was kind of they just decided, they brought in this head to come and kind of, she had to make the decision. She was great, actually. I loved her.
Why was it being closed? Because it was too small and
yeah. And then I think the head had gone off sick. One of the other teachers was off long-term sick. And lots of things were getting very difficult, and I think that just the decision was made. But lots of parents then removed their children.
Okay.
Obviously knew which way things were going and sort of sorted things out for their children. Some parents were slower to do that, and so I think the first term I taught there, or first or second term I taught there were 20 children in the school. There were 10 in Key Stage 1 and 10 in Key Stage 2. Wow. And I taught the 10 in Key Stage 2, all in one room. And it's the school where Steve, that was his primary school.
Okay.
And I wanted him to come in one day and kind of see what I'd done with the displays and all of this, and come in and look at the classroom. He spent his whole time going, I used to sit here, and I used to sit here, and this is where I sat near the sink, and this is where Deborah so-and-so did that. He had a lovely time. But then,
did he say that thing like everything looks so big or small, whichever way around it was?
I think he talked about the smell, how it smelled. Yeah. But then, so come Christmas, the school was, that was it really, and most children had gone. However, after Christmas, they asked me to come back because there were 3 children in the entire school who hadn't got places sorted out for various reasons. There's 3 boys. One of them was 6. One of them was 10, I think, and the other one was 11, something like that. And that was the school. 3 boys.
You taught the whole school?
I taught the entire school. And in the classroom, there was me and 2 classroom assistants. And so the first day I came in with these 3 boys, we sort of started to do the register and, all that sort of thing.
You must have got through everything very quickly.
Well,
done by lunchtime.
You kind of don't know what to do. And as we started working, I just remember thinking, we can't do this. It was the atmosphere was just so intense. Because you didn't have that buzz in the classroom, you didn't have any of that atmosphere, and so I had to go back out to the car and get one of my CDs. I did, and I had to play background music, and it was the oddest thing. And so for me, lockdown, breeze.
Yes, I can see comparatively it's not so strange. Those 3 boys presumably did really well with that one-to-one teaching.
Well, I don't know, you think so, but it's too much. It's too intense. Like, it was one-to-one, and actually they need to be left alone a little bit. But you felt like you weren't doing your job. You know, if you kind of stepped off and sat back, you just kind of thought, well, should I make a cup of tea? You know.
How bizarre. How has your school, because you've been in a school regularly recently, haven't you? How have they coped with lockdown? What's it look like there?
I think really well. I mean, everyone's done the best they can, haven't they? And we've been very aware that I've been very lucky to be working this lockdown. The first lockdown I didn't work at all.
Okay.
And I love that too, actually. But this one I've worked, and that was partly because they had to go onto Google classrooms.
Okay.
They had to remote teach as well. And it's actually impossible, as you know, to do, remote teaching and teach the children of the key workers who were in. So I was there in the classroom doing the teaching, which was really nice, while they were trying to answer a million emails and take them through the stuff online. So it worked. I loved it. One day I got too close to the laptop when no one was watching and made everyone do a pet share. That was my favorite morning, because they're not supposed to put their cameras on unless they've got permission. They're not supposed to put the microphones on or anything like that. So I said, quickly get your pets. And one of my favorite things was that there's a boy in year 6 who's got a hamster called Baron von Biscuit.
Great. And I think to the outside world, I think it could have looked so difficult, and there were so many things about it that were tricky, but I think kids adapt quite quickly, don't they? And I think they've been the same with coming back. I've been asked so many times, how's it been, that transition back? And I think kids are much more in the here and now than adults, aren't they? And I think they're just like, well, we know this and we're back to this. And whereas we thought we were going to need to do lots of transition stuff and PSHE and art so that they could talk and all those things, that it became immediately apparent they just wanted to get on with what was normal for them and what they knew, and school as they'd known it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I tried not to make them feel more worried than they needed to be. And one of the things I said to them was, I know, of course, if you're worried, you can talk to someone. Of course, some people have found it hard, but I'd just like to let you know that I'm fine. And it's okay not to be worried. If you're fine, that's great. You don't. Children kind of follow our direction.
Don't feel you've got to drag up some kind of emotion that you're actually not really feeling.
Or if you kind of say, now this is a very hard time and this is very difficult, and they'll sort of go, ooh,
it must be.
I'm meant to be worried.
Definitely.
And one of the things I said to them, because I'm teaching year 6, is what all you're doing is navigating a really big transition, which is what you're about to do when you go to high school. And so what you've done is you're learning how to navigate a big life transition, and in a way you're practicing. So this is really good. And actually when they go to high school, we don't worry about them in quite the same way, but I would argue that's a bigger transition, actually. So
definitely.
No, they've been good. There've been some children who've been very anxious, but anyway.
How glad were you that you were on the teacher side and not the parent side of homeschooling? So many times I thought, oh my word, I think it was tricky. And I think parents approached it differently, and some were trying to replicate school with timetables, and particularly in that first lockdown. So I think people came at it differently. I think schools' expectations were different. But so many times I thought, oh my goodness, I could hardly get my Jack to read for 10 minutes a day, let alone if I'd been the one trying to get him to do all of the schoolwork. It wouldn't have been pretty in our house, I don't think. What would it have been like for your 3?
It would have been different for the different children at different ages, actually. So it would have depended how old they were. The girls generally were better. Sam, you had to put a bomb under him to get him to do anything. But I think what I've noticed is there's been a few children who've absolutely come on a storm since lockdown. And so although we're all worried about the ones that have been behind, and for some children it's been the best thing, and the parents have been brilliant, and they've been able to concentrate on the thing their child needs, which is what you can't always do as a teacher, because you're trying to do everybody. And so for some of them, I've been able to say to the parents, well done, you have brought them on, know, it's fabulous.
And I've come across some that seem to have done really well because there weren't the distractions of a class. So for them, the sort of just looking at the screen and getting on really, really suited them in a way that we wouldn't have previously known, but it just made them really, really focused.
And they're out of that massive system that just kind of rolls on regardless, and that's the thing about school. You've got to fit into that system just because of the number of people. We can't all do our own thing. We have to move as a herd, and that works. It has to work the way it does, but it really doesn't suit everybody.
No, not at all, not at all.
So I mean, I'm all for. I think a lot of parents have done a brilliant job. I think anyone that's tackled it has done a brilliant job. And I was saying to parents at the time, anything you do, if you can do 10 minutes of something, that is a win.
Absolutely, because so many parents,
and
parents were trying to work as well, weren't they? Which was, I just can't imagine. Really difficult for some. So we've mentioned your three, who are way out of school age now. So you're in this whole new phase of life, like me. Kids are grown up and have gone and come back. Some have come back. So I love it though, and I kind of reflect on those school days. I loved all of it, but I really love parenting adults as children. Do you? Is it a phase that you're enjoying?
It's been my favorite phase. I call it the gingerbread years because the last 5 years we've had a gingerbread competition every Christmas. And they've been either at home or coming home from uni, or one way or the other. It's been that transition time, but they've been grown-ups. And I think there was just a moment where I realized that late teens bit where you suddenly think, I've done it now. This is my job finished, and now I just offer advice if I'm asked. And I now, it was like that kind of, oh, thank goodness I can let go. And it was the first time I really felt like I was able to be myself.
Right.
And that's been lovely, because the rest of the time there's this persona that I felt like I had to have, which was this kind of paragon of virtue. I certainly never did anything wrong when I was a teenager. And so I would tell, I never told them stuff I got up to, because they would see that as a kind of a loophole, or sort of like, well, you did it. So and it was just lovely. It's just lovely not to be the parent. It
brings sort of much more of an equality, doesn't it? It's shared experiences and responsibility. I love it so much. And of course, Sarah, your journey with parenting has been so different to mine, in that I think people will know, but maybe people won't know, that you'd married Steve after Sarah, his first wife, had died. And so you didn't begin this parenting journey with babies, but you immediately began parenting 3 small children. And had you always seen yourself that you were going to be in role as a mum? Was that something that had always been part of plan? We talked about wanting to be a teacher. Was mum kind of something that you were looking forward to in life?
I think I was. But it's really interesting. God just puts you in the right place, doesn't he? Because I remember thinking, not in my 20s, my late 20s, thinking, I'm not sure I want babies. I like children, but I'm not sure I want babies. I just think, God, well, I can sort
there you go.
And so when I was quite worried before I got married. I knew it was a lot. I knew it would be difficult. You don't know how it will be difficult. You don't know what it will be like, but you know that it's a big deal.
And the difficulty must have in part been in at the deep end, because I think sometimes with parenting you're sort of going through the stages and learning and everything's a bit new, but you really were thrown in at the deep end, weren't you, with three little ones, and not even just like one, like, oh, what do we do here, but three little ones.
I mean, I kind of play it down a bit because I think, to be honest, I don't think what I did was any more difficult than what you did, in the sense that when someone has a baby, there's this enormous physical change that's happened, and you've got hormones roaring around everywhere, plus you have no sleep, or disturbed sleep, and I think that's all very difficult in a different way. So I'm not sure what I did was more difficult. I think it was just different. But yeah, it was hard. But I think the hard thing wasn't necessarily the looking after the children. I think people think that was what must be very difficult. It's like 3 children, oh my goodness. And it was.
And they were young, weren't they? What age were they?
I think by the time I married, they were 9, 7 and 5.
Okay. Yeah.
Or very nearly there, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I know Rachel wasn't quite at school. I was married to Steve by the time she had her first day at school.
Okay.
So, but the thing for me that was really hard was I didn't know who I was supposed to be. I was very worried that I kind of knew I wasn't supposed to be their mum.
Okay.
They had a mum.
Right.
And I knew I wasn't supposed to try and take her place, but I wasn't their auntie, I wasn't their babysitter, I wasn't their friend. Yeah. And so I didn't quite know what the role was.
Yeah.
And stepmother doesn't bring anything helpful with it. Yeah. And so, but they needed a mother. They needed someone to test them on their spellings and put them in the bath and, make sure they brush their teeth and all of that. And so, I think the difficulty for me was that I was just very stressed about who I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing and how I was supposed to be doing it. And I was very worried that nothing I did would be as good as if their mother had been there and done it. So I built up this complex in myself. I was the only one that put that there. Nobody else did that. That was all me, which I've kind of looked back on since and thought, what a waste. What a waste, you drive
I understand that though. Because I think you were balancing the fact that they had lost their mum, hadn't they? So you'd got all of that you were trying to hold and weigh up, I guess. I think you've done an amazing job, and I imagine it was hard.
I didn't cope well, I don't think. I put a vision in my head of someone I should be, who I'm not. Okay. She's blonde. She's always wearing an apron. She's very pretty. She's got a little smudge of flour on her face. She's kind of quite plump and mumsy and motherly, and she's always baking, and that was who I thought I should be. That was who I wished I was, and so I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I couldn't live up to it. And at the time I was still working full time.
Right.
Because I decided I would keep that the same, because at the time that was the only thing that hadn't changed, because I'd moved house, because I thought Steve did offer to move, so there's a place that we had together. Yeah. But I didn't think that was fair on the children. I thought that's not, just for me, that's not a good enough reason to uproot them.
Right.
So I didn't want to do that to them. But there were lots of things. You had to talk about their mum, because they needed that. They needed to be able to talk about her naturally, and I wanted to as well, but that actually caused me a bit of pain as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I felt jealous, and and there were lots of photographs of her around, and that was that had to be okay too, but I didn't really like it, because it felt like then it wasn't my place, and lots of emotional stuff like that got very confusing.
And I guess you'd come into a very big family as well, and a church situation, all of which were places where Sarah had been well known, weren't they?
So and you knew her, didn't you? You were friends. Yeah. And that was, I don't know if that was a good thing or bad thing that I didn't really know her. Okay. I joined the church when she and Steve were still married, and I think I joined the church just as she was diagnosed, first diagnosed with the cancer. And then, so the whole time I remember praying for her. I went to her funeral, and all of the, you have no idea of your own future. But yeah, the family and the church, just amazing. And I felt pressure, but I put it there. It was me that put it there. Nobody's ever asked me to be anything I'm not. And such incredible support. And I know when I married Steve that there were so many people praying for me, and I could feel it. It felt like I was walking through really deep water that was kind of up to here, and it felt like God had me by the scruff of the neck like that. And he was just kind of holding my nose above the water, and I kind of, until I could get to somewhere a little bit shallower. But I really felt, and I'll tell you why else I really think that I felt I knew people were praying, was because the children never ever said to me, "You're not my mum. I don't have to do what you say," and I was waiting for it. And I wouldn't have blamed them, and I was ready for it, and I just waited and waited, and it never came.
That's amazing. I think we were really aware of how difficult it must have been for you, and didn't always know probably what our role in that was, how to help you. Do you know what I mean? So I think just to almost treat the whole situation as normal, I think was my strategy. Do you know what I mean? Just just be really accepting if I could, and but just so acutely aware that that was a big deal that you'd stepped into. But
well, it helped. Thank you. It was a good strategy, because I never felt, I mean, lots of things were awkward, but it was never made awkward by anybody else.
Oh, that's good. I guess even the prior to marriage, I guess even just dating Steve, dating someone that's a widower, that's got three small children, that must have had its own challenges and pressures as well, even before getting to that stage of marriage. I guess you couldn't just be terribly spontaneous and just up and out somewhere.
No, it was babysitters. Thank you, and publicly thank you to anybody that's babysat for us, because honestly, we're so disorganized. The amount of people we rang up at the last minute, Steve rang up at the last minute, and so many kind people. Yes, I'm probably going to be able to pay that forward rather than back. But I do remember one of the things that everyone was so pleased for us when we got together, and that became it wasn't secret at all. But I felt that's quite a pressure, because I remember coming to church and people saying, "I'm so happy for you." And me thinking, "We're only going out 2 weeks. This might not work," but I felt like I would disappoint so many people if it didn't work out. So there was that kind of pressure, because people were so pleased for Steve. And there was one time I used to go with him when he spoke out at other churches, and I went with him to a church who knew him well. And it was the first time I'd been there with him. And he'd been speaking, it had all finished, service was over. And I went to get him a cup of tea, because he was talking to someone on the stage. And I took the cup of tea up, put it on stage, and I turned around, and everyone was looking at me. And you know how when you say that, and you're exaggerating with about 5 people, but it really wasn't. And I could just sense this enormous curiosity. And I think I went straight to the toilet. But it was just, there was this kind of, because Steve was so well known, because Sarah was well known, there was an immense friendly curiosity, but that was still quite intense. And we went to a lot of dinner parties. And in the end, I think I had to put a stop to that, because people were just curious and they just wanted to get to know me. But I was a little bit fragile.
And I think that was the other thing that I would say we were aware of, that much as we wanted to, because we didn't know you, and much as we wanted to know you and be part of life in a way that perhaps we had been before, there was that acknowledgement, but actually, you know, you already do have life and friends and stuff going on. And I think there was a sort of acknowledgement of that for us, that you needed time, you just needed time.
Yeah, and I think that was a thing that I originally, you know, you kind of try and fit in where Sarah left off in a way, so the same group of friends, but you'd all had your babies together, and it was all, you know, it's just, yeah, it's a different, it's much better now. It's like you say, after time, and when you know who you are, you know, but yeah.
I can remember first hearing about Steve seeing you. I think you'd just been out on a first date, because I was part of a leadership team then, and Steve Miles, Steve's best friend, and I think I can remember it. We were in my home for a leadership team meeting, and we just like did an icebreakery type thing. And I think I'd just spent a weekend with my brother, and I just said, I've just had the loveliest weekend with my brother. Who have you all recently spent time with that you've enjoyed? And Steve just collapsed into giggles, like I was thinking. And so Steve said, I've been on a date. And there it was, the beginning. Yeah.
He took me for a kebab.
Oh, just so romantic. Beautiful.
I know. Oh, and he took me, we went to cinema to see the world's longest film, and it was Pearl Harbor, and then afterwards we went for a kebab, and which we ate in the car, and he was asking me weird questions like, do you like chili? Do you mind chili sauce? Do you mind if I have chili sauce on my kebab? And I was thinking, I don't care. And he was trying to say, if I kiss you,
can I kiss you?
Yeah, but I completely missed that. So he was saying, are you sure, you know, is it all right if I have hot? I was thinking, have what you want, you know, it's nothing to do with me. And eventually I tweaked why he'd asked me that.
Sweet.
I know.
So of course, like there's the whole dating Steve, there's the whole parenting the children, and of course Steve has this massive role in church. He's the church leader, and Sarah had led the church with him. So that, I mean, did you feel like you were catapulted into this role of vicar's wife type thing? You know, was the church set up, was that a pressure? Was it hard?
Yes, but because I'm sorry.
I like it when we have pets on.
I know. Well, Steve's gone shopping. Poppy! We might have to come back.
Shall we pause?
Yes.
Let's pause.
Oh, I hope.
We're back. We just briefly paused for Poppy. Is it Poppy? Is that the dog's name?
It is.
Poppy,
yeah. Don't say it too loud, she'll go off again.
Where were we? We were talking about, with all of those other pressures of life changing so much, and then being part of a church where Steve is leading the church. Not only that, previously Sarah had led the church with him. And so was that another place that was difficult to find your place, or did you feel pressured or an expectation?
I didn't, because nobody put that pressure on me. I'm so grateful. And also Sarah and I were really different. I mean, you would know that better than me because you know us both, but Sarah was an upfront person. She was in the drama team when Steve met her. She was on the stage, and I'm not that person. But I also didn't want to be seen. I was very worried about upsetting people. I was very worried about people who were grieving being hurt by me seeming to step in and sweep her away. So I didn't want to sit where she used to sit. I didn't want to, anything like that. I would try and avoid it. So I didn't want to do anything she used to do for that reason. And I was worried for no reason, I think, but that was my concern. And I think I just, I was already kind of involved a little bit, so I was already doing teas and coffees and the welcome and things like that. So I was doing my own thing, but I've just been allowed to do my own thing, and I so appreciate that. I think it's partly that it's the kind of church where there isn't a vicar's wife role, you know, and that helps a lot. I joke a lot about wearing tweed and arranging flowers, but yeah, there's never been any pressure on me to be anything that I'm not. Sometimes I've been more at the forefront, but still in my comfort zone. And now I really feel free to do what I do well. And
do you feel like that's been a process over time of you finding what is your thing and your way of doing it? Would you say now, for instance, like it feels an easy place to be?
Yeah. And I mean, I've done so many different things. So I've done lots and lots of different things. They're nearly always involving people and welcome, or, you know, some kind of social, making people comfortable. But I thought
you were going to say food, involving food.
No, I'm not interested in the food stuff. That's all Steve. But yeah, I did kind of welcome to the forge. I've done lots of small groups. I've done, I don't know, but I've helped out in all sorts of places as well.
And I think you very much, I don't even think about it. I don't think it's just bringing it to my mind because we're talking about it. But I think you so bring yourself to your roles. And I think all the things you do just, suit and fit you so well. Definitely.
Thank you.
What's your faith journey been? You said that when you came to Suffolk and you began teaching, you wanted to look for a church. So you clearly were a Christian at that time. Had you been introduced to God early in life, or was it a later thing? What's been your journey?
No, I've been a Christian all my life, nearly.
Okay.
My mum came to faith sort of properly, I think, when I was either before I was born or right around that time. And so she brought me up properly Christian, and by that I mean it wasn't a church going thing, it was a real faith. So I made a commitment at some point in like primary school age. I think it's between the ages of 7 and 9. I know because we were in the old house, and I can remember telling Mum when she was hanging out the washing, so I know I was less than 11. But I remember it. I remember praying, and I remember telling Mum the next day. And so that was my point of conversion, as it was. But then I grew up still believing, and I never really lost it. So I was confirmed when I was 14, because I grew up in the Church of England. But I have not been baptized, and the reason I haven't been baptized is because when I was confirmed in Dedham Cathedral when I was 14, I really meant it. And
that was you were choosing to,
that was my public
that you were absolutely.
So if I'd have just been going through the motions, then I would have, but no, that really meant something to me. So I've been a Christian, you know, all that time. And it waxes and wanes, you know, like most people's faith does. You know, you have your good bits and your bits where you're a bit limping along, but it's been growth with periods of stalledness. I think now I understand that when you're emotionally troubled, your spiritual life suffers as well. You know, when other things are going on in your life, that's the time sometimes when you need other people to pray for you, and you need other people to carry you, because that's when you just can't do it, and you blame yourself.
I think that's such a helpful thing for people to hear, Sarah, because I think sometimes we can feel that that's a failing, that, you know, if you feel like your spiritual life is dipping for whatever reason, that's an element of failure. But I think you're so right. I think so many things can impact it, particularly your emotional and your mental health. I think they can have a massive effect.
And I've struggled. I've been very depressed in my life. I'm still on antidepressants now, although I think probably I could try coming off them. I tried coming off them once and then went back on, but I think it might be I could probably, have another go quite soon. I think it'll be fine. But yeah, one of the things I learned, and it was from a talk at the Forge or MCF, I think it was then, that if you're suffering with, if your mental health is suffering, of course your spiritual life will suffer. It's the first time anyone had said that, because I think otherwise, if you're not careful, you can assume that because you're a Christian, that's going to help you out of it, and it doesn't really work like that. And yeah, I found a lot of helpful stuff. There's a really good book on depression by a woman called Sue Atkinson called Climbing Out of Depression, and she was a vicar, I think. And she was very, very depressed. It's the kindest, gentlest book I've ever read, and yeah, I've internalized, I think, just about everything she says in that. So I kind of live by those rules, and I repeat that to other people who I talk to.
Because I think like you just alluded to, I think there can be that sort of idea that if you're a Christian, then you shouldn't struggle in this way, because all the answers are to be found in God, and he can bring that wholeness. But actually, mental health is on a line with our physical health as well, isn't it? And we would seek out help for our physical health, wouldn't we?
And you don't, that's like, you don't blame yourself.
No.
If you're diabetic, I often say, if you're diabetic, would you refuse the insulin? Would you be trying to come off insulin? No, because you need it,
Yeah.
And I think it's embracing what it's a combination. And often if you're very depressed for one reason or another, there's no point trying to do counselling or talking therapies or anything until some of your hormones or whatever it is are a little bit more balanced, because you can't even think straight, and often it's not until you're a bit better and you look back that you think, gosh, I was actually quite poorly. At the time I thought I should just snap out of it, and I couldn't see why I couldn't, just get on. But then when you are well and you look back, you think, no, I couldn't, I was in a state. And it's being a little bit kinder to yourself, because all the shoulds and the oughts, they just load more on your back, when you're already barely standing. But yeah, it's hard.
I think society is much better, isn't it, at talking about mental health nowadays. We've just had Mental Health Awareness Week, haven't we? Do you think the church generally, not necessarily ours, but do you think the church generally is a bit behind, or do you think we're kind of keeping up with those conversations and the reality about mental health?
I think, I don't know, I would say the church is always a bit behind. But in a way, that's a good thing, because it gives you time to reflect on what's going on. You don't really want to necessarily be at the forefront, I think. Sometimes you kind of need to watch the trend, review it a little bit, reflect on it, and then decide what your position is. I think as long as the first approach is always love, then you can't go far wrong. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I think you hear stories of people not being very helpful about any kind of mental illness, but those are the stories you hear, and what you don't always hear are the really lovely stories, because they happen to, where people just put their arms around you, and they, and the church really loves and cares for people, but they're not so well publicized, those stories.
No, that reminds me of I think the last time we had coffee, we were chatting about a book you were reading, and I'm reading something very similar now. In fact, I thought it was the same one, but it's not. But about I'm reading something called Factfulness, and it is Factfulness. I'm only a few chapters in, and it is about some of that, like you're saying. You don't hear the good news stories. They're not news. They don't make they don't make news that kind of feeds out. And so a lot of what we often hear is skewed towards the negative. And so with that comes our perception of so much, and for this book that I'm reading, so much about what's going on in the world, or what has happened over history, or what trends are, or how things are improving. and generally, the premise of the book is that things are improving, things are all getting better, but that's not what we often hear, because it's not the sort of thing that sells news. And you were telling me, and I think it was a very similar book, wasn't it?
It's by, I've got it. It's by looks like this.
Yes,
Humankind.
Yes.
A Hopeful History. He's written another book which I haven't read. No, I'm going to show you his picture now, because I think he's quite handsome.
Let's look.
Don't you think?
I think he's quite handsome.
I think he's quite handsome. He's called Rutger Bregman. He's Dutch.
Oh.
And it looks like quite a weighty book. I didn't find it difficult to read, but I don't know, you might be able to get it on audiobook, I don't know, if you're not really a reader. But it's just, what I love is, it's what you said, is that he's interested in the fact that for most of us, our daily experience of life is kindness, that people are good to each other, that people will help each other and that sort of thing. And yet, if you ask people what the world is like, they will tell you it's going to hell in a handbasket, and that everything's getting worse and we're heading downhill. And he's interested in that disconnect.
Yes.
So why is it that when our experience tells us one thing, when we enlarge that view, we have decided that it's terrible? And a lot of his view is the part the media play in it, because of the selection. So not only do they select which stories they report, but they also select how they report them. And it's been lovely to read a book that just affirms what I think. It's probably not always good for me, but I've just loved finding someone who agrees with me, that actually we're presented with one view, and nobody seems to really question that. You watch the news and everyone goes, oh, it's terrible. And you think, actually, that is not the whole story. That's not even part of the story. Or it's part of it. It's just a small part. And my view now is that for every bad thing that's going on in the world, there is at least one person working their socks off to try and put it right. And there's I don't know if it's still up. I'm sure it is up. There's a website called Karuna Virus, which I remember getting very excited about. I heard it on, I think it was Radio 2 or something. And it was a website that, it's Karuna as in Karuna, I think. And it's Sanskrit, it means compassion. And so they put this website up sort of as a response, I think, to the panic. And it's just full of lovely stories of people doing lovely things. So there's one man who couldn't sell his crop, his normal thing that he would grow, so he grew sunflowers instead, and he gave them to the whole village. And it's like, the world is also full of that. That is also happening. And I think it's what you see what you look for, I think, partly. And I think I was just discussing with Steve the other night, when people say, oh, he needs to be in the real world. That's another one of those things you think, what is that then? My reality is that people are kind. My reality is that if someone drops a wallet, it gets handed in, probably 8 times out of 10.
It's like when people say something nice happens and they say, oh, it's absolutely restored my faith in humanity. And you think, well, what normally happens then? Because these are the things that normally happen. And yet that is a phrase that trips off your tongue, isn't it? As if, because everything else is so awful.
And it's those phrases that I think we have to question and avoid. So it's that restores your faith. Actually, my faith was already there, and like you say, the norm is that people are good to each other, and the norm is that people will cooperate. He talks about what he calls, Rutger Bregman, he talks about what's called Veneer Theory, which is the idea that civilization and being good to each other is a very thin layer, and at the moment trouble comes, that veneer will crack and we'll reveal what we really are underneath, which is barbaric and every man for himself, and that tribal kind of thing. He says Veneer theory is quite prevalent. It's a kind of accepted truism, but he says all the evidence shows that when you put people together in situations of adversity, what happens is not that at all. It's the opposite. It's cooperation. They help each other. And he talks about, do you remember all the floods in New Orleans when it was so devastated? He said that there were terrible reports coming out, all kinds of rumors, that they'd put a whole load of people, refugees, basically homeless, they'd been made homeless, into, I think it must have been a stadium, it was called the Superdome. Right. They were all sleeping in there, and there were reports of rapes and people slitting babies' throats and all this sort of thing. And as a result, it was become this dangerous place, and everyone talked about the veneer of civilization and how it cracked and all that sort of thing. And they delayed, I think, the government response going in. And it said, well, after it all settled down, the truth came out, which is, they said there was looting and, people shooting each other and all that sort of thing. And it said, what actually happened? I think there was one person in the dome who died of a heart attack, and I think one suicide or something like that, but nothing like what was reported. And he said that where looting did take place, it was kind of like a Robin Hood looting. So there were organized parties, often with the police, who went and got what people needed. Right. But because of the panic that the media had, because it was obviously exciting, it meant that there was an armed response as they went in, and they were so nervous and worried that they shot some people, a party of 7 people on a bridge who were unarmed. Right. And it's just that, it's powerful. What you say is powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a time when I was in Barcelona, and there were some protests going on that were being reported all around the world. And so people were saying to me, "Are you okay?" And what's happening? I think I saw one flag somewhere, and yet I could sit in the hotel room and see it on the news as if it was just flooding the entire city, which it wasn't. It was bizarre to be where it was, but I actually saw absolutely nothing.
Yeah. When the children were growing up, I used to make them sit down and watch how something was presented, sometimes on TV. So I would say, I remember we were watching The Hotel Inspector once, and I said, come and look at this, see this shot here? That is not the response. See, they're having this little interview, and I was saying that shot they've used before, because they're using it again, look, because it makes her look like she's disagreeing with what he's saying. Look how they've done that. And I would say, look, listen to the music that they're using whenever this character appears on the screen. It's kind of comical. You're not meant to take him seriously. And and I think it's really important to understand that there are people with agendas. There's a story that's being told.
There was quite a lot in this book that I was reading about newsreaders, and I think it was to do with election results or votes, but just looking at how things were covered and how they were reported, and just even intonation in the newsreaders' voices, and statistics showing that it actually had an impact on results. It was very interesting.
I remember them saying once that there was an ambulance response time target. They're reporting results 95%, and they were saying why was this, and could they explain why 95% and not 100%, and they were apologizing for this. And I'm thinking, hang on, 95% is amazing.
Yes.
And that's reported as bad news. A sign of failing. And it's just and sometimes on the Prime Minister's briefing and things like that, you can hear the questions from the journalists, and they're so negative. It's embarrassing almost.
Absolutely. And kind of quite goading, aren't they?
And I think, whose agenda is that? Who is it that wants to destroy, that wants to pull down all the time? And that's what is considered to be the role of journalism almost. And it's not. I think true journalists understand, and real journalism shines a spotlight on things that we need to know about. But there is this kind of horrible agenda, it seems.
Absolutely. It's this kind of I think it's your positivity and your real ability to kind of extract information and come at it at a slightly different angle that I've seen so often in small group scenarios, which I think you are just brilliant. Particularly, I've done alpha with you, and
Yes.
every time I've just thought you're so good at it. And I've had people, you know, that have done the course say how good you are, because I think you're very, very good at this kind of discussion, drawing people out, and also empathizing. I think you don't go into those situations with your own agenda of like, you know, I need to make sure that you've completely understood everything about God. I think you're really good at just like finding out what other people think as well, and very gently drawing that into conversation and leading it on further. Is alpha a real kind of sweet spot of yours for serving? Is it a passion of yours?
I think it is. I mean, thank you for saying all of that. I worry a lot more than that I, you know, about how I do it and whether I've said too much. And
oh, you're the best. You're so good. I love doing alpha with you. It's so good.
It was fun. It's true. I've learned a lot from alpha. I think I've been doing it for quite a lot of years. Oh, that dog! Shush. And yeah, I've learned a lot from listening to people, and what I really like doing is listening for the question behind the question. So I really like to listen and think, what is it you're really asking?
Right.
What is it that you really want to know? Yeah. And because sometimes people are doing their best to express themselves, but it's just not coming out, and they're getting frustrated. And I can see sometimes Steve will answer a question, I'm thinking, that's not what they're asking. That's not what they're asking. And so I think that might be an innate thing, a gift, you know, that God has given, just like you're given empathy, or you're given your various things. I think I can read people sometimes and hear certain things. I'm not always right, but I think I can pick up on things sometimes. And that's good, because that's what it's for.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do like alpha. I find it quite stressful. I think it's because I'm trying so hard.
But you see, that surprises me so much, because I think you just look like you're so comfortable. You look like you're just in your real easy place of natural conversation. That
might be because I'm taking the mickey out of Steve. That is an easy place to work from. Yes,
Sorry. Have you got kind of standout moments that, like, if you look back, I know you've done loads of alpha courses, have you got any moments that you kind of like stick out as, I don't know, either poignant or funny?
I don't know. I mean, there are funny ones. That time that Nathan brought one of his friends who was not completely sober, and that was
didn't he spill his plate of food?
Well, that's what Steve remembers. I don't really remember that. It was the most stressed I've ever been in alpha, and he came in. He was lovely. I mean, he was a lovely, happy drunk. He was, and he came in and sat down, and I'd made sure I was sitting next to him. I was between him and somebody else, but somehow he got up, I got up, something, and he ended up right next to. It's the first night of alpha. So everybody's nervous, and you're doing your best to kind of let everybody know that this is very normal, and, you know, we're all normal people and no weird Christians here and all that sort of thing. And he kept on leaning around behind this girl, Gemma it was, and tapping her on the opposite shoulder, and going, and she was, you know, she was a sensible woman, so she'd seen it all before, but I felt awful. And I remember we put the video on, and so he settled down a bit. I thought he was on his phone. I thought he might go to sleep, but he clearly had quite a high tolerance, and he just found things on his phone, and then he was trying to show them to everybody in the group while they're watching, and they're all doing their best to kind of ignore him and watch the thing. And in the end, he asked me where the toilet was, and I thought, yes, good, toilet. I will take you to the toilet. Let's go together. And I just got him out of the room, and Nathan was busy there trying to get a taxi. And fortunately, I think Win Fenning came and drove them home. Right. But he was playing, what was it? Oh, it was called Russian Steve, that's right. And he was playing I think either he's not Russian or his name wasn't Steve, one or the other. And he was playing something like Iranian pop music in Win's ear all the way home in the car. And yeah, so that was kind of
a memorable moment.
Yeah.
And yet, in a sense, you know, that's what we say with Alpha, isn't it? Come as you are.
Yeah, we do. Only now we've changed it to come as you are, in brackets, sober. As long as sober. That's the rule now.
So you do a lot, I think, Sarah, a lot of giving out. I think you support people really well. I know you love doing small group and often run too, which is lots and lots of giving out of yourself, I think. How do you make sure that you receive enough? We would talk about, you know, having enough stuff to fill us spiritually. What is it that you have or do that kind of fills you up spiritually?
Well, actually, the small groups. So that's a giving and receiving. So yeah, that's a two-way thing. I learn through that. I think I learn a lot through talking. So I'm an extrovert and I need to discuss things to learn. So yeah, I learn through talks at the Forge, through researching things for Steve, through reading certain books, because he hates reading, so he often say, could you read this book for me? Right. So I've done a bit of that, and I've learned great things that way. And also, yeah, I think you don't have to read Christian stuff to learn from God, you know. And I think like this, the Humankind book has just been brilliant, and you kind of learn a lot of things that inform your view of the world. That chime in with your Christian beliefs. And I think it's really interesting to kind of work out how does this fit, you know. And Rob Bell's a great author. I've learned so much from him. And in his book Velvet Elvis, he says if it's good, it's from God, you know. If it's good, you can claim it. And so yeah, a lot of things.
And I think the best thing that we can do really is exactly that, isn't it? Just like bringing God into everything, into the here and now, into the things we do, the places we go, and inviting him to be part of it. And so not putting him in any kind of box.
Yeah, because he should be. If you're a Christian, it should be who you are. You know, it's so knitted into you that you can't separate it anymore. And I think that takes a bit of learning sometimes, because depending on how you're brought up, and C of E, this is not to blacken C of E, but because it was great for me, but it can categorize things because it likes its structure. And sometimes then and I think probably it's true for all of us, isn't it? You have just to be organized, you have to put things in boxes. But I love when God just overflows them, and you see him all over the place. And yeah, we've done some really good activities in small group or in between small groups. So one of the things I love doing is saying, this week, do all your normal stuff. So watch EastEnders, watch all the things you normally watch, but ask God to, you know, pray about it beforehand and see what God says to you through all of these things. And that I hear God in pop songs, I see God in films, you know, everywhere. And I know I'm not the only one, but it's, that's easy.
It's definitely what I've been trying to do more of as well. I think, you know, we're really encouraged to spend time with God, and particularly this emotional healthy spirituality course that we're doing at the minute about, you know, really being mindful of spending time with God. But what I've tried to increase is inviting him to be present in the things I'm doing. So if I'm, like you're saying, whether it be watching telly or sometimes where I've been gardening or music that I'm listening to in the car, that sort of thing, just really inviting him to be part of it. Even like, you know, I really love this song, Jesus, you know, let's listen together. And on what do you want to say to me?
I really think it's my thing that no one, you know, and they said the angels and the heavenly host was singing when they came down to the shepherds when Jesus was born. Nobody said what they were singing. They just said, well, no, that's not true. They did. They said, glory, glory, hallelujah. But they didn't mention whether or not there was a beat or electric guitars. And I often think, you know, one day I really hope it won't just be choral music. I really hope they're going to be singing It's Raining Men or something. When you finally I just can't believe, that God creates all this diversity and complexity for us all to be in white nighties singing, choir songs. Can't be possible.
No, I often think he does tend to think, that's not actually what I meant.
Yes.
Yeah. So we ought to wrap up. It's lovely talking to you. We're looking at restrictions, lifting. Hopefully, I realised recently that has sounded a little more precarious again. What does the rest of the year look like for you, Sarah?
Rachel's getting married, our youngest daughter, 3rd of July. Hopefully restriction free.
Yeah, I guess you've done a slight.
Well, it is what it is, and I think that's another thing I shouldn't really get started on, but I think we tend to see our life sort of running along in a track, and while everything's going well, everything's good, and then when something derails it, always everything's gone wrong. And whereas I think that's just life, these are just things that happen. Nobody said our life had to always work and be good all the time. It's just, even just not good, it's just things are what they are, and so we'll just make the best of it, whatever it is.
That's an amazing thing for you to say, Sarah, because I know we all look back on this last year and it's been tricky and everyone's had their difficulties, but of course you've had a massive difficulty in losing your dad, and that was completely unexpected, wasn't it? And yet you seem to be in a good place. Is that partly bringing that same kind of thinking to something as devastating as that?
I think so. I think it is, and it's also, I'm aware, a lot of prayer, and I think a lot of people are praying, and you can feel it, and it cushions you, and it soothes you, and it protects you, and it does carry you through. And there may be part of it that I've heard someone else say, they didn't grieve properly for their father until their other parent died. And there's certainly an element, possibly. I mean, I feel kind of normal and good. I don't feel like I'm suppressing anything, but I think there's some element of me holding things together a little bit because I'm thinking about mum and looking after mum. So there is an element of that, but I don't feel, that I'm really suppressing things in a way that's going to do me damage. But I dream about Dad sometimes, and he just turns up. The other night he was annoying me. He was singing. But he just turns up, and at the moment it's just, I think about him a lot, but in a nice way. So I often think about him when I'm brushing my teeth, because he used to make a big deal of brushing his teeth, and just things like that, and nice things.
I'm glad that that's your experience.
So
finally, let's wrap up with an "and finally" question. You have, and we've talked about some really big stuff that you've navigated in life, Sarah, and I think you are just quite inspirational. I genuinely do. If you could put into one sentence, which is maybe a bit of a big ask, if you could put into one sentence your recommendation for how do you make the best of life? How do you make the best of life, Sarah? What would you say?
I was going to say I've seen this on Twitter or Pinterest. I think it's stay sexy, don't get murdered. But
I laid money on you were going to say drink more gin.
Yes, I know, I nearly did. But seriously, I would say, and this is from an Andy Stanley talk, but I think it's really true, believe the best. And that's of people and situations, and not in a naive way, although there is an element of that, but it's surprising how, in believing the best of something, that is the reality that's then created. So I see that at school. I will believe the best in a situation where children are arguing, and I'll say, well, they didn't mean to, and they're not going to do that again because they're sorry. They didn't realize that you felt that way, and now they understand. And I kind of put words in their mouth, but actually it's amazing how they rise to it. And I think if you believe that someone's kind and you go out into the world expecting to meet kindness and friendliness, that is what you meet.
Yes.
And
And it's got to be a much better way of approaching things, hasn't it? Because I think if we do the opposite, it actually affects us, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. And and my experience, I'm kind of what I now call myself relentlessly positive. And I have to keep myself in check a little bit, because that can be a little bit glib and a little bit insensitive. So I have to balance it. But on the whole, I prefer to look at life that way. Like you say, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
That's wonderful. And I think it's something, I think so much of what you've shared, Sarah, will be really helpful to people. I think when you've talked about mental health, when you've talked about parenting the kids and some of those things.
I haven't always been like this, let's say. Yes, anybody that wants to talk to me about the other side, I've done that as well.
And I think you truly are inspirational, and so very lovely to chat to you this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Let's do it again with cake.
Yes, I think we could do that again soon. I'd love to. But thank you. Really appreciate your honesty as well. Thank you, Sarah.
Take care.
See ya. Bye.